I got to tell you, I went back and listened to some of our Mojo Mondays, Rick, and I start the same way every time by going, ha ha ha, it's Mojo Monday. Rick Hale, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. How are you? It's perfect. It's awesome. I'm sure I start the same way too, man.
I don't know.
I don't know. It's
I just
it's
laughed
like
at
we're
myself.
pre-programmed. But you know what? Here's the thing: if you're pre-programmed for the positive and you're pre-programmed for an inspired and amazing day, is there a flaw in that strategy?
100%.
And the
And
answer is no.
hey, by the way, it's a greeting, right? You greet people the same way. We're greeting our friends every Monday morning, right?
Yeah. But the
Awesome.
difference is we start out, ha ha ha, you're awesome. We love you and you're great. But then we go deeper because the real value of that engagement is beneath the surface. And it's the second, third, and fourth level question. And we're here to ask them.
Because we don't settle, sir.
No
We
way, not even
stop
close.
settling. We are in your book. And I couldn't be more excited. Today really got to the meat of it. Chapter 5 in this book is titled The Path to Your 5-Year Future Self, which is really the meat of stop settling, right?
It is. I mean, there's certainly the preemptive stories that lead to perspective. And then, when you get to chapter 5, now it's about X's and O's. It's about crafting a plan. It's about re-engineering your life so that 5 years from now, you're able to turn around, look back and say, my life is awesome. And it's by design, not default.
Yeah. And you open this chapter talking about the difference between a mission statement and a vision statement. And we're going to get there. And it's fun to me because I actually was sitting down last week with a young guy, helping him craft his mission and vision statement around where he was going in a certain part of his business. And it's not easy, but I think your perspective or maybe your contrast between the two is worthy of maybe you sharing this morning.
Yeah. I mean, listen, you can go to business books and distinguish mission and vision, values and beliefs and perspective. And it really gets convoluted. And sometimes there's a bit of overlay and it can be confusing. I try to keep it simple. And my perspective for this practical purpose is that the mission is kind of present oriented. It's today, it's here and now. It's the X's and O's of what you're going to do to accomplish task and reach. And the goal is that your mission leads you to your vision. The vision is more of a statement of inspiration and even aspiration. And I love the word aspiration because it's you aspire to something. And the root word of aspiration is aspire, and aspire means to breathe life into. And so the idea is inspiration and aspiration combined lead to a vision that's really, truly, truly exciting.
100%. You said a vision statement is inspirational, motivational. A vision statement is future oriented and aspirational. You talk about that in the book. And then, but the mission statement in contrast is really just that down to earth. Let's get on the same page of who we are and where we're going. Right.
Yeah. It's here and now. Today's mission basically, and what are the marching orders to achieving what you want from this time in life?
Yeah. And as I was reading this chapter, I was thinking, why is it we're so clear of who we are today, but we're not very clear where we want to be tomorrow? Or sometimes we are, and we go through the work and we do the work, right? And really, that's what this chapter is about.
Yeah, it's about crafting a plan. Honestly, my intent is to make it, you basically provide the easy button.
Yeah.
Here are the, 10 steps to a perfect you. Sounds kind of dorky or silly, but it's not. I mean, why we complicate life? I don't think it's conscious complication. I think things just get in the way of clarity. And the idea behind this book is to break down your life into 12 pieces and create small, components or spokes in the wheel that when they're fully inflated and fully executed, creates a life well lived and a round wheel that rolls well.
There you go. You also brought up the GPS again. We talked about that in previous episodes, but the concept or the analogy of, hey, when you're driving around in the city you live in, you don't really turn on the GPS to tell you where to go most days. But the minute you go somewhere that has some unfamiliarity to it, you usually turn on a GPS. Well, in context of a vision statement, you probably need a GPS on how to get there. You probably need some pathways, some instructions, some journey help to get to those vision statements or that 5-year future self, right?
Yeah. And the question is, are you living a redundant, repetitive life, or are you on a journey and a path to that great place? Or are you just running around the same city block over and over because it's familiar? And, but at the end of the day, familiar doesn't always reveal your ultimate best. It's really a redundant experience. And we're creatures of habits, and we're also creatures of safety. We try and it's an innate thing not to take risks, and an innate thing to stay safe. And unfortunately, awesome doesn't live in safe.
Yeah. I mean, you and I attended a conference a few years back in San Francisco. Speaking of the word aspire, right? Like he wrote his book, a gentleman named Kevin Hall. Uh, he really made a lasting impact on all of us, but you had a unique experience. Do you mind sharing that experience?
No, I'd love to. It was one of those moments where you just, and it's also a testament, by the way, to putting yourself in places that you wouldn't normally be. We flew out for this conference, and it was quite expensive. It was in San Francisco, and there were, I don't know, half a dozen speakers and authors, and all amazing. But this Kevin Hall guy, weirdly enough, was speaking on day 2, and day 1 at the evening event. We went to Walt Disney, like this little mini museum in this historic district of San Francisco. And I would have never guessed it was even there. But the cool part wasn't going to the museum, although it was cool, is that we hopped on buses, and I jumped in the front row with this guy. I'd never met him. And as we pull out, it was about a 40 minute ride, because we were kind of racing through rush hour. And he started asking questions almost immediately. He started probing, well, what do you think of this? And what about that speaker? And what did you get from it? And what's your perspective? And by the way, if you want to honor somebody at a really high level, ask them deep questions, and don't just accept the first answer as the patented, their perfect end all answer. Go, oh, that's cool. And why did you think that? And what he started playing that out. And I immediately was drawn to him. And obviously it's because he was interested, not necessarily interesting. He was interested in me. And at one point I realized he was also taking notes, and it was almost weird when I realized he was writing it down. I'm like, I noticed you're writing. And he said, yeah, I have this belief. He goes, you carry 2 books with you everywhere you go, the one you're reading and the one you're writing. And there was a weird pause for me, because I'm like, I had to process that out. And I'm like, oh, you're writing a book? He goes, yeah, I'm an author. I wrote this book, Aspire, which, by the way, I then, of course, we bought a copy, read it, and it's an amazing book. It's just words that help you define your purpose. Yep. And so I highly recommend his book. And I highly recommend taking his approach to getting to know and connecting with people, because it really shows genuine concern, care. And at one point, I said, well, I hope you got something good. And he says, man, I've got more Rickisms than I ever thought I could. You made my day. And I just remember leaving going, holy cow, I'm all right. And isn't that the gift in a relationship and a friendship, is to make people feel all right?
Absolutely. My gift in this conversation is now I have the word, a Rickism.
Rickisms,
it's now in my vocab. I don't want to go into the specifics of this chapter, but you go through kind of a workbook kind of exercise, if you will, how to break down certain aspects of your life and certain questions to ask yourself. And it's really it's very thorough and very specific and very deep. Like, you got to really kind of work on yourself inside this chapter. And I think it would be important to just say that pick up a copy of the book, go through. This is the workbook part, right?
Yeah. When I wanted to share wisdom, and I wanted to share my story, and that's where the idea of writing a book came from. And then as I processed out, how can I make this practical and useful? One day it just came to me. The most important thing that I believe that I do regularly is teach a workshop called the 5-Year Future Self, where everyone comes together. I get a big group together for 4 hours, sometimes longer. And we work through the process and the psychology of how written goals matter, and how breaking it into bite-sized pieces makes things more tangible. And the world of potential will come to you when you put it in a way, or you write it in a way that looks, possibility and even probability. And so there's only one of me, and I can only do this so many times a year. And it's common that someone will occasionally text or call and go, hey, when are you doing your next workshop? And so it occurred to me, man, why couldn't I just script the formula inside of my book, and this become like the meat of where you walk away with something that gives you the empowerment to become a better you? And so this is really step by step. It's like a recipe in baking a cake. If you follow the recipe, you drop the right ingredients, you cook it for the right amount of time, you get a really good result 10 out of 10 times. But you can't do this driving around town or listening to your headphones on a jog. I mean, this is like you close the door, take a few hours and really put your head down and put your heart on it.
100%. And I would just encourage everybody to do it. That's kind of the biggest part in this whole thing, is not that it's there to inspire you, it's there for you to do it. So your life becomes a vision statement. Your life becomes that foreign place that you've got to turn on the GPS to figure out how to navigate to get there, right? One of the things that I think I would love for you to comment on this morning is the difference between goals and intentions. And you talk about that in there because I think, well, I'll just let you roll. What's goals versus intentions?
So I think everyone understands what a goal is. It's when you throw a flag in the ground somewhere in the future and you say, that's where I'm going. That's what I'm either going to achieve or obtain. And what I've learned over the years, coaching countless people in our industry and in our world, is that goals are really important. Without goals and without an action plan and without accountability, the odds are you're not going to land in a new place or achieve what you want and set out to achieve. But I've also found that people often default on their goals, mainly because they don't have inspiration, and the aspiration isn't behind it. They pick a number or they pick an experience solely because they think it's important. But at some point they wake up and they're like, I don't know, like maybe it's not important, or it gets hard and they default because it's hard and they change their mind and then they switch direction. And I think the reason is they aren't clear on the intention behind the goal. The intention is the why. As a quick, easy example, my father, was a doctor and he had a Porsche. And I remember as a kid riding in that car when I visited, thinking I could smell it. It was a physical experience, but it was like my body would resonate for some reason. I admired him, wanted to be like him. Yeah. And then it smelled the leather. And then I'm like, I'm going to own a Porsche one day. I'm going to, and by the way, Porsche people, it's not a Porsche, it's a Porsche. And I'm like, I'm going to have one of those. I can't even say it. I was only like 9 years old. And what's funny is I did achieve that goal. And I just remember driving around. The first day was amazing. The second day was pretty awesome. The third day was okay. And by the end of the first week, I'm like, it's a car. And so the why, I had to get really clear in the why, because the journey and the why was way more inspiring and exciting than the acquisition.
100%.
So, yeah. So there is a fundamental difference. And when your goals get hard, if you're not really clear behind the intention of the goal, you're quicker to default. So I spend a lot of time forcing, in that workshop, requiring that people stop and script. What is the intention, not just the goal? Here's one more example, Brett. Yeah. Really good health. When I was younger, I probably would have said, man, I want to be healthy because I'll be physically attractive and I could, climb this and run that and jump, run my motocross bike over stuff and be physically capable. And, I want to be a badass of some sort. And as I got older, staying healthy gets harder. Things just break. Things don't feel good. And, I'm in my 50s now and man, every day it seems like there's something I'm like, what the heck is that? Like, I didn't, go on a marathon. How did I hurt that?
You don't want to share that you had a pickleball injury and couldn't walk for a few weeks?
I'd rather not. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I pulled a muscle, was out for 6 weeks. All I did, I failed to stretch, as stupid as that sounds. But here's the thing. When I think about good health today, the intention for me, when I stop and really, really put meditation and prayer behind it, is I want to live a long life as free of pain as possible so that I'm alive and capable of keeping up with my grandkids one day and my great grandkids. And so that's the intention, free of pain, and enjoy my family for as long as I can, because ultimately that's the most important thing. It's not just, physically being able to run a race. And that's more powerful.
Yep. I love it. All right. I love asking you a question out of the back of the chapter at the end of each one of these Mojo Mondays. And the question, I'm actually going to ask you a question inside the question. Your question says, as you've considered your 5-year future self, how do you feel about dreaming big and becoming well-grounded in all the categories? My actual question to you is this concept of dreaming big. And sometimes we call it think big, but really dream big. I'm not sure everybody is super comfortable inside dreaming big, or finds it very easy to dream big at sometimes, or maybe they do. I just want your advice, your wisdom. What is dream big? How do you coach somebody to dream big?
Well, I'll start by saying if your heart, if your heart leads you to the same things repetitively, the same causes, the same experiences, the same tribe or group of people, then listen to your heart. That's step one. And, this is like if when you're scripting your future self, the most important thing is to get really clear on what your heart wants and let your brain catch up. When you've heard this before, if if the why's big enough, the how will come to you. You'll figure it out. And it may not be about you. It may be part of someone else's dream. And maybe you're a spark and not necessarily the entire fire that's so intimidating and scary when it comes to dreaming big. So if you've got the one singular thing, that's a gift. What I've found is that most people don't. And even for me, sometimes, there's been a few, Mount Everest moments where I'm like, man, if I can climb that, open my first office and we get to 100 agents, we'll have made it. And then you get to 100 and you're like, well, it really needs to be 250. That's just part of dreaming big and then achieving and then dreaming bigger. But if it's not singular and obvious, what I find most people struggle with is what we call the big why. The big why is nothing more than what inspires you to ultimately, in your very last breath, that you became the person you're supposed to become. You impacted the people you're supposed to impact, and you lived into your potential. And it's rarely one thing. It's not like they did this, you invented something or created something or did something no one's ever done. To me, a life well lived is actually the amalgamation or the collection of the 12 categories lived to their fullest as a collective. And that gets easier. So I think people struggle because they're looking for one thing, when my best advice is take a hard look at all 12 things in the wheel of life and then figure out whatever number you're on, 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever it is, what does one better look like? I think your subconscious brain and heart absolutely thrive when you're in a mode of progression and you're moving towards things and you feel that I did something one step closer to achievement. Yeah. And so, for a wheel to run round and smooth, you've got to have balance and counterbalance, and the collective matters the most. And I'm reminded of a story I heard from Jeff Hoffman. I spent a day with Jeff. He is the billionaire who invented or created Priceline.com. And I think there was another company he did with Elon Musk to begin with. Long story short, I donated to a particular charity, earned the right to spend a day with him consulting with, there were a group of about 20 of us. And he talked about resonant frequencies. And I've never heard the word resonant frequency. And he said, I had this dream one day of owning a Ferrari. And he goes, I bought this Ferrari. And he goes, at one point I thought, man, I own a Ferrari. I should probably test drive and see what it can do. He goes, I got it up to a number that you wouldn't believe. It was like 175. He goes, it was a straightaway and I just punched it. And he goes, at one moment, it went from like the roar. It was a freaking roar in my car to absolute silence. He goes, it was weird, eerie. And I thought I'd broke the damn thing. He goes, I literally went home, parked it, called the dealer and said, I think my car's broken. It went quiet. And the guy chuckles and says, that's called resonant frequency. And he's like, what the heck is that? And he says, it's when the entire body, the chassis, the components, the motor, everything operates. It's really perfectly timed and connected, and everything gets quiet. It's like flawless perfection. And so I like that story because I think our bodies crave that resonant frequency. And I don't think it's one thing. I think it's when you're not leaving behind a category or dishonoring something important because you've misfocused your energy. I think it's the collective that creates a life of resonant frequency.
Rick, stop settling, will you?
It's bite-sized pieces. It's not, it's funny. It's not complicated. It's just not easy. You've got to take attention and focus and put it in your day planner and make it part of a daily practice.
It is Mojo Monday. Have a good week.
Thanks, brother. You do the same. Hope everybody's having an awesome Monday.